for Detroit with Mort Crim, Kai Maxwell, Sonny Elliott with weather, and Al Ackerman with sports.
Good evening. Americans are beginning to understand tonight how intensely we are disliked by much of the Muslim world. At last, we too are being forced to face Mecca. In front of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, held for 18 days by militant Muslim students, thousands of Iranians today masked and marched and chanted, "Down with Carter." Inside, 49 Americans remain hostages of the Muslim students. And those students are talking tough again, threatening to kill the Americans if there's any military move against Iran. Speaking through a student interpreter, one of the militant leaders said the hostages won't be released until the Shah is returned.
These people are spies working in the United States Embassy, and some documents support this very strongly. If the United States government does not reply to the Iranian people's requests, we will begin the trials and will carry out the sentences.
And just what happens if the U.S. tries to use force?
Our first step is to destroy the hostages.
Well, there are growing fears that American hostages are already being mistreated. One administration spokesman who asked not to be identified said some hostages are being bound hand and foot for 24 hours at a time, that they are not permitted to move around or get any exercise, and that messages from relatives are not getting through to them as their captors had promised. The 13 hostages freed earlier this week will be home in time for Thanksgiving. Today they were supposed to answer reporters' questions at the Air Force Base in West Germany where they're being treated. Instead, one of them read a statement drafted by the Iranian students who held them hostage. The 13 were promised that the remaining hostages would be treated better if their statement was delivered to the American people.
According to the students, many unarmed people were killed with weapons furnished by the U.S. government, and SAVAK and military personnel were trained by the U.S. government and the CIA. They say they don't believe the Shah is ill.
The 13 former hostages will arrive back in the United States around 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Mort?
And there was another violent outburst of anti-Americanism, this time in Pakistan, where thousands of enraged Muslims stormed the U.S. Embassy. Some were firing rifles, and in the melee, a U.S. Marine sergeant was shot and killed. The embassy was burned. 100 Americans had to be rescued by the Pakistani army. $20 million worth of buildings and 50 vehicles were destroyed. All of this because the Pakistanis believed an erroneous report that the U.S. somehow was linked to an attack yesterday on Mecca, the Muslim holy city. While the embassy was under attack, 2 other American installations in Pakistan also were under siege, but there were no injuries there.
In an effort to understand why the Muslims were so violently angry over the attack on Mecca, News 4's Victor Livingston spoke with a Muslim minister here in the Detroit area. Here's what he learned about the meaning of the holy city and the emotions behind the violence.
Detroit Sunni Muslim leader Sheikh Mohammed Kharoub just returned from his first Hajj, the annual Islamic pilgrimage to the holy Saudi Arabian city of Mecca, and its sacred El Haram, or Grand Mosque, scene of the bloody takeover. The siege disturbs this imam, or holy man, and he points to a small Islamic sect called the Shiites, whose numbers are greatest in Iran, as the most likely culprits.
I feel that it might have been a show of support for this particular sect in that holy city, for their brethren in Tehran that are now being beleaguered, they consider, by our country here.
Imam, how do you feel about a religious shrine being used as a pawn in a political chess game?
I am opposed to the use of that, or utilization of any sacred shrine, whether it be a Christian shrine or a Jewish shrine or Islamic shrine, to be used in the game of politics internationally.
The attack came on the first day of Muharram, the first month of the Muslim year, when the faithful cry out, "God is great," and turn toward Mecca to pray. Imam Kharoub says the takeover of the El Haram Mosque shows that there is divergence of viewpoint among the Islamic community, but he says all adherents to the faith believe foremost in peace, and the Imam hopes peace will prevail. In Farmington Hills, I'm Victor Livingston, News 4 Detroit.
There was another anti-Iranian demonstration in our area today, this one on the campus of Henry Ford Community College in Dearborn. the scene of a heated confrontation last week. Today's rally was quieter, as anti-Iranian rallies go, but an effigy of the Ayatollah Khomeini was burned while students looked on. NBC News will present a special report on the Middle East situation at 11:30, immediately following our newscast, and coverage of the arrival of the released hostages tomorrow morning at about 10 o'clock. Kai?
Still to come on News 4 Detroit, bed cutbacks will mean trouble for small hospitals. And bad news for the defending turkey trot champion. Those stories and more in a moment.